Okay, I wanted you to see. I don't know if you can see the notice saying eviction notice. So I know trying to show you the what this article is going to be about, and it's more than just the article. It's not just the article. It just kind of adds to what I'm trying to talk about. And what I'm talking about is um, during the early stage of the pandemic, there was a moratorium. And so a lot of people, a lot of states had participated in um, what would be called like a rent freeze. And so some people heard that as being that they don't pay any rent. And they didn't really go into the details of reading whether or not they were supposed to pay rent after the rent freeze was lifted. So rent freeze didn't mean stop paying rent, period. It meant rent was on a halt until they lifted the moratorium. So you could pay rent, but you didn't have to come up with the full amount. You could pay, like, I think a quarter of the amount until you had gotten your job situation straightened out, or if you found another job, because there were a lot of people who their jobs had closed or they closed down altogether, and people were forced to seek unemployment and get another job or go into something else altogether. And then some people lost their job. So I just want to forewarn you, this video is going to be probably lengthy. And some of my videos are lengthy. And you may not be able to see every picture, and you might hear some background noises, but what I'm talking about is really about what's been happening in South LA and what's happening in LA County and Inglewood as well. Hawthorne, Watts, Compton, like all the neighboring cities um, have had similar situations. However, what I've noticed is, and I'm just telling you what I see because I'm residing in the areas that I'm talking about, or I'm working around or living around or driving around in that sense. So I'm familiar with it. So it's not like I'm talking about something that I haven't had any type of interaction or some type of experience at seeing how it has affected the people that are around me. But what I've noticed is a lot of Black and Hispanic people seem to be the families that are the highest numbers in evicted people. And homelessness, and I've said this many times in my videos, that it's different types of homelessness. Some people are intense and they're on the street, but you also see people in RVs, and it has spread it. You'll see people not just in Skid Row, they'll be on the beach, they'll be in front of public places, in parks, under the freeway, um, near the freeway, in areas that once were areas where people frequented for like maybe weekend um, There's some businesses that had complained that there's a larger number of homeless population, or a number of people that have set up camp in front of the businesses, and the businesses lose money because it, I guess, depreciates the value of the business, because people don't want to, come into the business or be around people begging them for money, or for whatever they may be asking for, or they feel threatened. I've heard stories like at the beach where some of the homeless, and I'm not saying all, have been more, and they've been dealing with issues of mental illness or substance abuse, and then there'll be violence, and then there's some homeless people that have been more aggressive, more violent towards customers or people that are just frequenting areas, and it has become areas where people no longer want to go to have dinner, or to go to certain places on the beach, because they feel that it's unsafe. This is not anything new. It is growing, and it's getting worse. And I'm just being honest with what I'm saying. They kind of clean up a place, or they try to sweep the homeless away, and then within the hour they come back. And so a lot of this homelessness too is being caused by the high rents. And so the high rents, that seems to be happening in all the metropolitan cities, and now not even the cities in the South. There's places where it's just unaffordable. It's like the rent just keeps getting higher and higher and higher with no stopping point. And the jobs that people are working, they're not really making that type of money. And I've said this. And so this is where they come into this problem here. And so I found an article that pretty much validates what I had been saying. And there's many articles that validate, and many, if you go to different cities and you just take a look at what's going on around you in some of the cities where people are just working class, you'll start to see a number of situations where the rents are getting higher, and some people will blame everything on inflation because they say a recession is coming, and then you had people that were freaked out by it, so there were heavy layoffs at the tech jobs like Meta. They laid off in the thousands. There's Twitter, they laid off in the thousands. Some people voluntarily quit because Elon started taking the reins of Twitter, and there was some blowback from a lot of that. Then you have Amazon, and then Google, and some other places. They're protecting their company rather than the people. And so some other companies had laid off just before Thanksgiving, and it caused a lot of people a lot of financial harm. So I don't know if you see a part of it says eviction or eviction notice, but this is Florida realtors. But it's not just only in one state. It seems to be growing. And so this title, I believe, fits every situation that's been going on around the globe here in the U.S., where the rents have been skyrocketing. So it says rents and eviction are skyrocketing. We need national housing security. So this is an opinion piece, of course, but it is, I believe, very true that now other people are seeing that this is not an isolated situation. It is spreading to a lot of other cities and states and towns, even, where you're hearing places that you wouldn't think would have problems with people in housing, but they are starting to see this, and it is causing a great concern. And so something definitely is going on. I don't know how to pronounce the contributor's name, but it's here in the article. It says rents and eviction are skyrocketing and we need national housing security. So it's Manjo Mate. I don't know if I pronounced it correct. I probably didn't, but I thought that this was so true that we do need something done about this because it just only gets worse. And what happens when you have people that are desperate? There's a lot of job loss. There's a lot of people that aren't working, and somehow there's all these hiring signs. I don't know if you've seen this, but there's hiring signs. But the places that you see them at are fast food restaurants, little small jobs. They don't pay 2 and 3K type of money a month for people to live in luxury or live in apartments. And so it sounds like it's a case of greed versus people who just can't afford it. That's what it sounded like. So in the midterm election, local governments from California to Florida passed a range of housing measures, so including rent stabilization. So it's significant investment in affordable housing in response to continuing inflation and a surge in the rent price nationwide. While the measure will provide significant relief and address housing security in many communities, so they don't go far enough to address the ongoing eviction crisis, which this is happening not only in Florida, it's happening in LA County, it's happening in most places. So over 3.6 million evictions cases were filed in 2018 after declining early on in the pandemic. Evictions have steadily increased and returned to pre-pandemic levels considering the following numbers. It doesn't seem really good at all. So in Las Vegas, the Justice Court is on track to hear 45,000 eviction cases in 2022 alone. So that's Las Vegas. So as compared to earlier years when the average was closer to 30,000 cases. So in Dallas County, home to the city of Dallas, landlords filed 60,000 evictions between January 2021 and November 2022. So in September this year, 6,685 eviction cases were filed in Phoenix metro area. That's marking the highest number since 2008. And so the evictions have surged in Oklahoma County, which includes Oklahoma City, and over 40% higher than were prior to the pandemic, with 1,800 evictions filed in September alone. The recent surge in evictions coincides with the end of federal pandemic legislation and policies aimed at assisting renters preventing eviction and foreclosure. So during the pandemic, the federal government enacted legislation establishing the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, appropriating over $45 billion in rental assistance and related measures. So in addition, Congress, President Biden, the Center of Disease Control each took action to authorize and extend national eviction moratoriums. This was between 2020 and 2021, so the actions were unprecedented and marked an important milestone for the nation to help to prevent and delay over 1.3 million eviction cases in 2021. But the end of the moratorium, the federal rental assistance funding, the U.S. has reached a critical juncture that highlights a key reality. Unlike the national constitutions, the U.S. Constitution does not recognize a constitutional right to housing. So this is what is scary. So I'm just saying this out of my own mouth, that there's definitely a crisis with housing. So they don't talk about it enough so that people can wake up and see what is going on. What do they say? Wake up and smell the coffee. So as a result, there is no constitutional floor that provides universal protection and safeguards for vulnerable renters in every state. And so This is a crisis. I'm just saying this. Let me say that again. So, the lack of a guarantee of housing stability has significant implications for the exercise of other civil and political rights in our system. Housing insecurity impacts individuals' health and well-being, their ability to work, and their ability to vote, participate in our political system. So, housing insecurity poses an existential threat to the promise of economic opportunity for all, but it disproportionately impacts minority communities. And so this is basically validating what I had been saying all along. So, in the absence of the federal constitutional right, it is imperative that Congress enact legislation to create permanent protections and legal safeguards for renters and to make permanent and annual federal rental assistance funding to guarantee housing security and stability for all Americans. So, to be sure, landlords were also significantly impacted during the pandemic, especially those who rent individual houses or smaller units of units, numbers of units. And so, however, as illustrated during the pandemic, the federal rental assistance funding and eviction diversion programs can provide benefits to both renters and landlords. So, indeed, many states and localities have enacted policies and actions aimed at reducing evictions through eviction diversion programs, legal aid, and right to counsel programs for renters. Recognizing the need to coordinate with states and localities as the pandemic rental assistance funding runs out, the Biden administration has taken some important actions. So, a recent White House summit in August, the Biden administration highlighted eviction diversion initiatives in Michigan, Indiana, New Mexico, Texas, and legal aid to right to counsel programs in Chicago, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., Detroit, Cleveland, and New Orleans. So that's just to let you know how serious this thing is. It's spreaded everywhere. So while these are significant measures, they still constitute a temporary and incomplete patchwork of policies that do not reach all Americans, as many state and local governments are doing little to protect renters as rents soar and eviction filings are skyrocketing. So we saw a glimpse of a possibility of federal power to address systemic crisis during the COVID-19 pandemic. So the pandemic highlighted the day-to-day precarity that millions of Americans have been dealing with for decades. So listen to that. Many of Americans have been dealing with for decades, but at the same time, the pandemic also that highlighted the weaknesses and shortcomings of our federal system and temporary and limited nature of the national response to eviction crises during the pandemic. So it's time for Congress to enact a National Housing Security Act to stabilize housing markets and communities. So the act would codify legal right and protection for tenants and eviction diversion policies that have been enacted in 31 states and 67 localities. This would include codification of a right to counsel for tenants and pause on evictions processes for rental assistance applicants. So these policies have significantly reduced the number of evictions in cities including San Francisco, New York, and Cleveland. So second in line, the American Rescue Plan Act 2021, the National Housing Security Act, would allocate $25 billion annually to permanently fund a national emergency rental assistance fund and provide support for affordable housing and homelessness assistance programs. The Biden administration recently redirected $377 million in rental assistance funds to states with larger numbers of tenants that quickly spent down their allocated funds. So the act would target funding to states based on the size of renter populations. So we cannot and should not wait for another pandemic or national health crisis or emergency to take action. Congress must act now. So that's pretty much that article right there. And it just basically outlines some of the issues that I have been talking about in previous articles and previous videos about homelessness and housing issues, how serious they are. And it has not stopped, it's gotten worse. Aside from some of the other issues that are going on. So I'm going to switch over here. There's another article that basically highlights just what I've been saying. Black Mexican families seek restitution. This is in Palm Springs. Evictions. Okay. So the evictions began in the late 1954 and continued for 12 years. Okay, so this sounds like this is nothing new, but it just seems like it's gotten worse over time, and it just seems to get worse. So this is all the way from 1954 to 1966. So this is by Carlos Granada. And so this article came out recently, and it sounds like this.
Well, the city of Palm Springs is facing legal action from hundreds of families who used
basically to live. Is telling story about what has happened in terms of the families that it targets. So hundreds of Black and Mexican families announced the filing of an amended claim.
Yeah, the families were evicted from a neighborhood dubbed Section 4.
The city of Palm Springs caused up to $2 billion in harm to families who were forcibly evicted from the downtown Section 14
in the 1950s and 60s.
This
Section
was
14 was a
1950s and 1960s. And so usually the people that get hit the hardest seem to be people of color when it comes to these type of crises. And so hundreds of Black and Mexican families announced filing an amended claim Tuesday asserting that the city of Palm Springs caused $2 billion in harm to families who were forcibly evicted from downtown Section 14 neighborhood during the years of 1950s and 1960s. So Section 14, it was a 1 square mile neighborhood
area where people of color were allowed to live.
Caliente and Cholula Indians.
News reporter Carlos Granda
and it was
has the details on their increased demands for
People
restitution.
of color from the 1930s to
My father worked hard
evictions
and built
began
our home
in the late 1950s.
and we had to leave it behind.
So,
Delia Taylor says she was
so
traumatized
like
as a child when her family home was destroyed.
We
were disrupted
where this
and
has
uprooted
happened,
from our homes.
and it just seems to
Happiness
be
turned to
the same
bitterness.
thing again.
She's
but
one of
now you
hundreds of
have
families
all
in
these
Palm Springs who were
issues
forcefully
that
removed
come
from their
up.
homes
But
more
the
than 60
people that
years
seem
ago.
to get hit
It's an
the
area called
hardest
Section
is the
14,
people
and this is how
that
it
you
looks
see
today.
here. So
A 1
attorneys
square mile
representing
area east of
evicted
downtown
families
Palm
held a
Springs.
news conference
Back in
LA
1959, residents
to
were
announce the
evicted from their
damage
homes
claims.
in order to develop
So
the
my
area.
father
The
worked
plan wasn't
hard
to
and he
provide them
built
with
our home.
housing
You might see on
relocation
the
or to
side,
provide them with
see,
financial assistance.
maybe you
The
can.
plan was
But
to use
they
fear.
basically had
People
held
here
a
say at
press
the time they
conference
didn't get
talking
any
about
notice
how all
before
the
some of their
families
homes were
impacted
demolished
by the
and
evictions.
burned.
We
So
saw
these
the
are little
homes
stories
burning
of snippets
around
of people
us,
talking about how
smelled
they
the
had been
smoke.
traumatized.
Clueless
Families
as a
in
kid.
Palm Springs, they were
But
forcibly
when I
removed
look
from their
back
homes.
and when
She
I
was in
think about
tears
it,
and she told
it
the
just
story
breaks
of
my
how
heart.
she was
The families and their
traumatized as a
descendants are
child when
filing
her
a lawsuit
family home
against
was
Palm Springs.
destroyed.
Our estimate
And
of
so
how we fix it
we were
is up to $4 billion.
disrupted
Don't tell
and
me that Palm
uprooted
Springs
from our
can't afford it.
homes.
And today the
And
city says over the past 2 years,
basically,
it's been working to make
that's
right
what
what happened.
happens with the
It issued a
eviction
statement.
situations.
While this
People
process may
get
seem to be taking
tossed
longer
out
than some
of
might
their
like, the
places
city
that
has an
they've always
obligation, not
lived.
only to those who
And
were
so
displaced,
that's
but
what
also
this
to its
article was
residents,
basically
businesses, and
talking about,
taxpayers
how
to thoroughly
there had been a
investigate the history
of
as it
this
develops
happening.
remedial
And it
programs
sounds
that are
like
fair
there's a
to
history
everyone.
of this
And a new
happening
city
in
council
other
is set to take
cities.
office around the middle of
And
December.
I'm
People
just
here say
using this
they'll now
so
have to deal with
that you
this
can
issue.
connect to this. So the
Reporting from
families
Leimert Park,
of
I'm
the
Carlos
descendants
Granda,
are
ABC
filing a
7
lawsuit
Eyewitness
against
News.
Palm Springs. Our estimate on how we fix this is up to about $4 billion, and don't tell me that Palm Springs can't afford it. So this was said by an economist, Dr. Julianne Malvos. So, Malvo, so the city of Palm Springs said over the past 2 years it has been working to make things right at what happened. So while the process may seem to be taking longer than some might like, the city has an obligation not only to those who were displaced, but also to the residents and business taxpayers to thoroughly investigate the history as it develops remedial programs that are fair to everyone. This is said in a statement. And so thinking about what just happened, the pandemic, and then more evictions that have been going on. So how does that also play into this?
Earlier video only showed a portion of what happened. Now we're getting a clear picture of the entire story.
Eyewitness News reporter Leanne Suter is live in our newsroom today with the latest from both sides. Leanne.
The LAPD is now investigating the fight between LA City Councilman Kevin De Leon and a community activist. Both men claiming the other started the altercation, much of which was captured on
LA County that had did similar situation that happened in Palm Springs where black families were uprooted and displaced out of homes they actually owned. And so they built freeways over, told the people they had to move away, even though they had to purchase a home, pay for the home, they lived there, or they was in the neighbor. It was a community, and then they just tore the whole thing apart. Told people, well, you can't live here. We're building a freeway in the middle of this. And people was basically kicked out. I've heard of situations where it's churches, community functions, and community, and things that are a part of the community, like could be, a school or something like that, and then they just all of a sudden they just come in and they just demolish everything, and it's their excuse is always, oh, we have to build a road, and now I wonder how they feel now, because now that's the complaint about having heavy traffic in LA, and all the smog, and now they're talking about eventually phasing out gas run cars for EV cars. And so see how that's kind of played a role in the environmental issues that we're dealing with. And here, those people back then, they weren't even thinking about what the impact of making all those roads and displacing people, and how that turned out. How it's now you see people there, still we're repeating the past, the bad things, it seems like. So anyway, what I've noticed is that, when I'm driving or I'm going around in the neighborhood, I still see a lot of hiring signs, but I don't see a lot of people running to get those jobs either. And so that should tell you something. I'm just letting you know. That should tell you something about the jobs, about how people feel about the pay in those jobs, and how they feel about how they get treated. And that's probably why they're not running to try to get those jobs right now. And so, and then we recently had 3 city council people that here in LA, I believe 2 of them stepped down, but one was still, they were fighting to get rid of him. I hadn't, as of yet, read all the details, except recently I saw a video that surfaced where he had gotten, him and an activist got into a scuffle, and they wanted him out because they had said some real racial things about black Hispanics or Hispanic people, and Asian people as well, that they had said some really racial things, and it was real harmful, and it had gotten out, and it was leaked to the public, and then there was an investigation because some people came in saying they wanted to investigate who had released the tape or whatever it was that these council members had said. They wanted to find out who leaked it, instead of them focusing on the fact that these people were running that whole thing. And that has to do with planning in the city of LA. It has to do with the community and the people, and their livelihoods and making decisions. And so if you feel these way about the people, racial, overtones, and you have this deep-seated, prejudice, then how do you think those people are going to be treated when you make the decisions that are very crucial about the living in that community? So that's what people were looking at. And so it didn't really sit well with a lot of people, so they wanted them voted out of those seats. And so I believe they did get rid of a lot of them. I think they silenced them, they suspended them, and I believe they were waiting for them to remove themselves from those positions. One, he was really not trying to remove himself, he wanted to stay there, but I guess the activists and some of the people that are in the community said, no way, we are not going to have people like this making crucial decisions for us, and that they have these feelings about the people that they're supposed to be serving. So that is pretty much that in a nutshell. But these evictions, they are extreme. Now, I will say this. What I've seen is people don't have the $2K, a $3K, a $3,000. What I'm saying is $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month, $4,000 a month in rent. And so some of these jobs that you're looking at, they got to work 2, 3 jobs, and it's by the time you're done, you're dead. You don't have the energy. You can't even function. I even saw where they were saying that some places were trying to pay more attention to the workers and the productivity, because they said the productivity in these companies and these places of business are not good if your workers are exhausted and burnt out. So they were trying to do experiments where people would have 4-day work weeks instead of 5-day work weeks. And so you'd get the same pay as you would get if you worked 5, 6, 7 days, but you're working 4 days. I believe 5 days pay in a 4-day work week. And so that's for people that have jobs that are like that. They get paid that way. And so the pay is not changed. It's just the days, the number of days that the person comes in or has to participate in work. Now, what I recently heard, this is something different. Elon Musk was saying that people would have to relocate. I don't know if it's San Francisco. I believe it's San Francisco, or to another place. Let's say you don't live there. And a lot of the people that was working for Twitter, some of them were working at home. He said they can't work at home anymore. They got to work at the office or wherever the place is. What if you live in LA County and he says you got to relocate to San Francisco? I believe that's where he said he was moving the place to. That you'd have to come to work there. And there's a whole lot of drama with all of that. I'm just saying, some people had voluntarily quit. Not everybody was laid off, but there was a lot of layoffs. And what I was hearing is the people that are wealthy, that pay close attention to where the money is at, were more worried about their companies and their asset in those companies. So in order to save those companies, they downsized a lot of people and they laid a lot of people off so that they could keep money. I heard Elon was supposedly taking a lunch program, and some people saying, oh, some of the people were really using the lunch program or the lunch. It was free lunch. I think Google was doing that too. I don't know if they, Google is different than Twitter, but some of those places, those tech jobs, they pay really well, and they offered the workers lunch. And so you work, you get paid, and then you have the opportunity to go to the cafeteria and eat lunch on them. It was already paid for. And I believe that's how it goes, but they said it was taking that out of there. And as the Twitter CEO Elon, supposedly he's supposed to be getting rid of that because it saves money and it was costly. And so that's what I've been hearing. So the evictions, think about it. Connect it. the dots. You have these high layoffs, now you have these evictions. Those people were making really good money. So, I don't know if they're in any of this or they would be part of any of this, but I would say if there's any new evictions that are coming up, that would be the reason, because you're making a substantial amount of income, and then all of a sudden your job lays you off. Now you can, right around the holidays, right? And so crime is going up. The housing, what people have been doing is home invasions. Crime is going up, like home invasions. There was something I heard called jugging that was happening, where now this is extra I'm putting in here. When you have people that are desperate, they're getting evicted, they're losing jobs, they don't have no money, it's the holiday time, all that pressure to buy things and have somewhere to live and stay, crime is going to be in there. It's going to go up. And so that should not be a surprise. So this thing I heard called jugging, you go into a place to use the ATM and people are standing around like they're going to use the ATM, but they're not. They're watching you. And they're trying to watch to see how much money you draw out. Then they can run up on you, and then they can have a gun or something pointed at you and then snatch the money as you withdraw the money, or either they might even force you to withdraw more money out of your account. When you have these ATMs, you got to be careful that if you see people standing around the ATM looking, but they're not using the ATM, they just watching you, trying to see what you get out of there, and they run up on you. And so they said a lot of that is starting to happen. It's getting worse. So that's FYI. I'm just letting you know, hanging around the ATM, around what's going on right now is probably not a good idea. If there's an ATM you can go in where it's well lit and there's more people and security, that might be better than just going to any random ATM and it's dark, and at night going to the ATM you by yourself, you don't know who's around that corner. So a lot of that is happening, and then there's these break-ins. And just recently I saw not only break-ins, people are even bold in broad daylight. They walk into the Foot Locker, it'll be a group of them. They go in there and then they just start taking shoes, taking clothes, grabbing like arms loads of items, and they run out the store with it. And this just happened. I saw something like that happen like probably a week ago. So and then shortly thereafter they were complaining on the news, said that it was happening often. And so I saw it happening. As I was I was going into a store, I was going into a place of business, and I saw a Foot Locker where all these young people went in there. They just started snatching everything and they ran out with it. And then the Foot Locker person that works in there, he comes out and he's trying to use his cell phone and he's trying to take pictures of the license plate, trying to see if he can get their license plate of their car. But a lot of those kids like that, they switch the license plate or they cover it or they use a phony license plate. So you got to watch that too. So there's a lot of stuff happening. So these evictions, all this stuff happening is only getting worse. And that beach, Venice Beach, all those little beaches and stuff, they used to be so pretty. You could go out there and just sit and have fun. Now it's scary. You go there, you don't know if somebody gonna knife you, or they following you, or they gonna go crazy on you and jump on you and hurt you. It's violent because it's mental ill homeless people that are there hanging out at the beach, and you could be sitting out there or you walking it, it's not safe anymore. And so now even the people that live up by the beach don't feel safe. And so, that's wealthy people or people doing well. You got to have some money if you live like on the coastline. But some of those places, they got to have heavy security over there because the homeless population just seems like it's exploding, and it's different levels. And some of this is a contributor. What you see in this article, the evictions. And so it won't be long that you see more homeless and more poor people than you do anybody with money. And you know what that's going to cause? It's going to cause a whirlwind of trouble. But recently, they had another article that was coming out saying that it was 800 migrants from Nicaragua that had came across the border of Texas. Now, how you let something like that happen? You know why? That's been happening. They didn't let it happen. That's already happening. That's not something that's all of a sudden it happened. This has been happening. You know what? I blame not the people coming from wherever they're coming from, because they're coming for a reason. The poverty, but there's poverty happening here. But the poverty might be different. It's just once they get here and settle in and they realize, oh, this is not that great as we thought it was. So I blame people that have them come here and they lie to them and they pay them low wages. That happened recently. It was a car wash where all of the workers, and I'm just going to assume that some of those workers are probably people that, like they complain about, oh, they're migrants, people from another place, they don't got their papers. They were paying those people low wages. And the reason why they do that is because they know the people are afraid. They don't want to be deported. So they take advantage of them. So they lie to them. They don't tell them their rights, or they don't know their rights, that they have any rights, or they feel they don't have any rights because they came here from not having a paper, or either their visa expired or whatever the case may be. So they threaten, oh, well, if you say anything, then we can report you or you'll lose your job. And they're just trying to hang on to that little money. That money might be a lot more than what it is in the country that they came from, that they had traveled from. So, but the living here is a lot different than there. So the living is more expensive. So that little money doesn't go very far. That paying under the table and stuff like that, you know, you start realizing this is not really enough money to pay rent and bills here. And so that's what the American people that have been here all their lives have been faced with. That this right here, and most of the people that is usually get impacted is the Black and Hispanic communities. They get impacted by this high rent and the way they treat people like this. And so that's why you see all them homeless people, like on Skid Row. I see a lot of Black people, there's a lot of Hispanic people. And then when you go like to Hollywood, you see the mentally ill, people talking to themselves and stuff like that, and hurting each other and threatening to hurt somebody, or they try to clear them out, and then within an hour they come back. So they haven't really made, they say they have put a lot of money into the homeless and housing and all that, but I think it gets into the wrong hands of people, and they take advantage of that, and they make the housing where it isn't affordable. And so they say, we're going to make affordable housing, but when you look at it and you start, affordable for who? Not for the regular working people that work these little jobs that don't pay nothing. It's not affordable for them. So that's why you see what's going on. And it's not getting any better.